right, here today with my good friend Matt Todd. Matt, I had the privilege of chatting with you here in Bucharest, Romania last year, and here we are now getting to meet online. So Matt is a EOS implementer, and I'm going to let him share a little bit more about EOS soon. But I got this email from Matt a few weeks back, said survival guide for EOS businesses. And I said, okay, we need to get this out there because this is just full of wisdom. And I think myself, and I know many other people are frozen in this time, or at least were frozen. And this email you sent, Matt, unlocked some, I know a lot of people and myself, and went, okay, tangibly, what do I need to do in this season? And so I said, Matt, let's jump on a call and record this and get this out there because people need to hear it. So Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Ryan. It's such a pleasure. I still finally remember that evening that we recorded in Bucharest last fall. It was just an enchanting evening, and thank you for that. And working with your team there as well. That was just a ton of fun. We met last week to kind of get our heads back in the game and focus, and I think it was a very valuable time that we spent together. And that's what I do. I help teams, leadership teams especially, come together, get their focus, and get their rhythm right. And so we like to call it harmoniously harmoniously organizing humans together and getting them on the same page. We build leadership teams, and we do it with vision, traction, and health. And by vision, we're talking about where a business or an organization is going, how they're going to get there, and who they're going to do it with. And so we help that all become aligned. And by getting the team together, they become accountable and disciplined together, executing on that. And if they do well executing on a vision that they all share, they're a healthier, more cohesive team. And if the leaders do that well, the rest of the organization sees it and does it very well themselves. And so that's what we do. We just help businesses get their focus and get on their business.
That's good. When I found EOS, it came at just such a needed time for us. I think EOS thrives in helping these entrepreneurial businesses. An entrepreneur like myself that kind of has a vision, a dream of doing something, and it grows, hopefully. And as it grows, you bring other people on board and you find yourself with a staff, a team of 15, 20 people or more, and just get how to take that vision and have other people help implement it. And that's kind of the starting spot. But then you really need to start hiring managers and other people that you need to impart the vision onto and have them help build the business as well. And I think that's where EOS, just like you said, in leadership teams, really helps the team come around a shared vision and then turn around and execute on it. So we are big fans of EOS, have been implementing it for a few years, and you've been a big part of our story helping us do that.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I know that in our small business that we ran, we grew that business from a small 17-person organization to a 75-person organization. And everything you just mentioned about how the complexities and the challenges continue to enter your business as you grow like that, we really see interesting inflection points, usually between 12 and 15 people. The founding entrepreneur just doesn't think anything's the same as it was. And the reason that is because it isn't. Nothing is the same as it was. And he can't do it all. And he needs those people to do their jobs well. We see other points at 25 people that you have a really weird mojo. At 35, that was our particular pain point in our business growth. Things started to smooth out a little bit for us when we had 50 people because we kind of felt like things were good. And then we burst forward again and found ourselves in a really painful spot at 75. So it's one of those things we call hitting the ceiling. It's one of those things where it's inevitable. It's going to come on you if you're growing a business. And what we found ultimately was, having done that the hard way on our own, EOS gave us a structure that made that profoundly easier to manage going forward than it had been knuckling through that and grinding through that through the normal way everybody else does that. So it totally, what you just said totally resonates with me.
Nice. So tell me what spurred you to start this, send out this email, and what were you seeing in the market that said, hey, I need to put this out there?
Well, I actually set that out when things were just starting to get a little bit weird here. I don't want to cast too much of my own personal view on what's happening. I just returned from a trip to Ethiopia And the sensibility we had there in Africa was so different than when I got home to Washington State. Washington State was one of the first states that really leaned into trying to manage from a governmental level COVID-19. And that's when I really started to pop on the fact that this was different than anything else we'd ever experienced. It was going to go down different than anything we'd ever experienced. And it was already beginning to affect businesses in ways that I hadn't even imagined. I think the economic implications of this are going to be far, far outreaching to the actual health complications of it, because they're going to be more lasting and they're going to be more damaging. And so it just made me feel compelled that, wow, for the people that are allowed to operate their businesses, we needed to really rally and figure out how to do that well. EOS is a tool system that in times of crisis, it just brings clarity to what you should do next. And so right now, in the time that we're living in, it's all about what I should do next. What should I do in the next week? What should I do in the next 30 days? And we normally like to live our lives in a 90-day rhythm because that's how we're designed by God to do. But this situation has imposed really different rules. And so we have to use our good common sense as well as the system that's provided to us to be better at that. And so I have a full spectrum of clients that are reacting to this all in different ways. Some people have been far more damaged by this by the COVID-19 than others have. Some people are actually thriving in this situation, which is hard to believe, I think. But you think about certain sectors outside of transportation and entertainment and those kind of things and travel. There are lots of services right now that are in higher demand. I mean, just in the United States, go to the grocery store and try to buy toilet paper. Go to the grocery store and try to buy hand sanitizer. And many of us have never, ever once in our lives experienced anything like this. We've seen it on TV. We've heard about it in news reports elsewhere on the planet. But in the United States, we haven't seen this before. So it's rather shocking. And I think it's pulling people in all sorts of different directions. And one of the really telling insights that I got from a meeting last week was the fact that this sense of loss is massive for all people in ways they don't even realize. We're just all trying to figure things out day by day. And yet, in the midst of things day by day, people have lost their jobs. They've lost their income. They've lost their ability to interact on a human level. They've lost their familial contact points. And sometimes you forget that those losses are happening to you and you haven't taken the time to grieve over them or manage your emotions in regard to them. And I found that to be a really powerful piece of what's going on with businesses and leaders that are freezing up right now, is they have not been able to manage their emotional impact of these losses that are happening. And this idea that there is grieving that needs to happen as a result of what's happening to us. So that's the context by which I felt spurred to offer something up. So
no, it's great, Matt. Really appreciate it sharing that. I think the idea of giving people permission to grieve during this time is critical and oftentimes overlooked, and especially us as leaders. For me personally, I can only speak for myself. It's hard to do that because it's you feel like you need to step into action, and it's like, I'll process this later.
yeah.
But to give yourself that ability to do it now, I think is critical.
Well, and right now, especially, we're all as leaders used to the idea of putting on the brave face, no matter what, right?
Yeah.
And this is truly an unprecedented situation. So you can't discount how it's affecting you as a leader. And I would still say, at the end of the day, you need to put on a brave face. This particular situation requires some additional empathy and some additional characterizations, so that as a leader, you're seen as vulnerable and available, because everybody's feeling this kind of different because nobody's ever felt anything like this before, right? And so your ability to be open, honest, and maybe even shed a tear if it's necessary, I think is a valuable thing to do in this time. And I don't think you'll come off as weak. I think you're coming off as, I'm a human being. And right now we all need to be more human, because that social distancing thing is creating a whole new mental health issue with people who have not been able to come in contact with other. And, so I think the humanness needs to come out more than it usually does. So if we've got that strong armor built on us of a veneer of, hey, I'm indefensible, it's like, no, I think we need to loosen that up a little bit right now. So
good. That's good. So on this email, you sent out a checklist, a bit of you called it recession/pandemic planning checklist. And I love that. The first thing you said, stay focused and completely disciplined. Walk us through that a bit. What did you mean?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do within our process is we have a weekly level 10 meeting. And I'll use your team as an example to where you said that, hey, we'd kind of actually not been as attentive to that as we could have been. And even your quarterly sessions, you said you'd had one, but you may not have been as on target with it as you might want to have been. And so when I came into that meeting with your group, you were feeling that, and I could sense it. You could sense it. And one of the comments that was made at the end of our time together was, man, it's great to get back on the same page. It's great to know what we're going to do tomorrow and the next day, right?
Yeah.
And that's what everybody needs right now. Everybody needs that. And so to abandon that, to abandon the constancy of your regular leadership meetings, to demand the constancy of setting immediate initiatives and holding each other accountable for performing on it right now is probably needed more than it ever has been. And my goodness, business is challenging enough, as you said earlier. EOS helps businesses. It helps them grow. It helps them advance. How much more impactful could it be right now to use those kind of tools to orchestrate where you need to be and what you need to be doing?
It's good. It's good.
Stay focused.
Stay focused. Second one, you said, make contingency, scenario, and cash planning a recurring IDS topic in your leadership L10 meetings every week.
Yeah, so for most of the teams I work with, one of their scorecard issues usually revolves around cash, available cash, cash flow, some sort of element of that. And different teams in different businesses handle that different in terms of how it impacts them. But everybody cares a lot about cash and how much there is and how much there's going to be. And so right now, because many businesses are having to scale periods of time where their productivity is down, their efficiencies are down, they may not have access to their clients' spaces and businesses to do their work in. Their clients themselves are all over the map, whether they're ill or whether they're just frenetic. They're unable to perform the normal duties. And so there's a threat to the normal course of business and cash flow. Even if you are in a very great business environment right now, you're having trouble meeting everybody's needs because of all those other elements. And so we've developed a few tools, and we implore people to utilize something to the point of how many days of cash do they have? What does a 1 month and a 12-month cash flow look like? Right now in the US, lots of people are seeking out this SBA loan, what they call the PP, the Paycheck Protection Program. There should be a good analysis of your cash flow before you engage in those type of loans or instruments, so that you know what you're getting into, why you're getting into it, and what the impact of it will be. And so we are saying right now that should be on your issues list, and it should never go away until you feel some point in the future that, hey, things have settled back into where our comfort level is where it should be, and our scorecard is enough to tell us how we're doing.
Nice. Tell us, for the people that maybe aren't familiar with EOS, give us a little bit of what is the issues list and what is IDS?
Yeah, sure. That's awesome. Issues are issues. We like to say that in any given business day, 134 issues just pop into our business as we're operating and rolling around. It's possible that today there's 268 issues floating into your business, or maybe even more. And what we typically do as business leaders, we tend to miss a lot of them because it appears to us just to be noise. It's just like, oh my gosh, that's just the noise of the day. That's a customer, this is my employee, it's whatever. It's just something I've heard before. And we start to turn it down, we turn it off. And the truth of the matter is we need to turn the noise up and level up on those things and actually deal with them and solve them, because it's that constancy of those little issues that are chipping away at us. They're taking away from our brain space and our energy space. And so one of the most compelling things we do in EOS is we say, just write that stuff down. An issue is an issue. It doesn't matter how powerful, it doesn't matter how big, and it doesn't matter where it came from. Just write it down. And immediately by writing it down on a list, you take a lot of its power away, because none of us realize on a daily basis how many things we're sustaining in our heads. Yeah. Because we haven't taken the time to document them. And by documenting them, how many times have you ever done something where you write it down and you go, wow, that's not near as threatening to me now that I wrote it down on a piece of paper as it seemed like when I was holding it up in my head. So
Yeah.
that's the first thing that we do. And then the second thing we do is we sort those issues into the place that they belong. There are some issues, and many of them in your business, especially right now in the midst of this pandemic, you shouldn't be working on right now. Long-term strategies, long-term buys, long-term initiations right now, you got to get through the next 30 days before you think about doing those stuff again. So we have a thing that we call the long-term issues list, and we just put them over there and we let them breathe. The important thing is we identify them. We identify them first and we park them. Then the other stuff that's in front of us in our weekly meetings, we do a thing we call issues solving track. Identify, discuss, and solve. And by identify, we try to figure out what the root cause of that particular issue is. Usually it's a person or a system or a process in our business, and we got to get to the root cause. We got to identify it clearly. We all have to understand it, and then we can start proposing solutions on how we're going to solve it. It's those proposed solutions that we call discussing, and we debate, and we talk, and we think about what are the right answers, and then somebody says, what are we going to do about it? Because too many times we get just stuck talking about them, right? We talk about our issues a lot, but we don't do anything to solve them. And so within the EOS platform, what we do is we say, what's the to-do? What are you going to do in the next 7 days that's going to make that issue go away? And so we have people write that down. We take ownership of what that to-do is, and we come back the next week and ask them if they did it. And that's what I find is one of the most meaningful pieces of what we do that's on the simplest level, is just that little form of accountability, not blame, but accountability. It's like, Ryan, if you say you're going to do something in the next week and we come back next week and it didn't get done, you know, you're going to be in a position to have to explain to the leadership team why you didn't do it, you know? And we're not trying to put people on the fire. We're just trying to get stuff done. We want to move forward. We want to clear the air. We want to clear the issues list. And so this resolving things into actionable to-dos is massively important. And then keeping track of them by writing them down so that you know whether they got done or not.
Nice. Good. So third thing you said, prepare to be the leader your company, family, and community need.
Yeah, so that kind of goes back a little bit to that retrospective over grieving and pain. You know, right now, the type of leader you need to be may depend on every individual you're thinking about at this moment in time. So I just worked with a business yesterday that had 47 employees, and we had some great conversations with them about how some of the people in the organization you could deal with in a very straightforward, direct fashion and be able to talk to them online. There's a whole nother group that they would have to really think hard about the way and the place that they presented it. Place is important when you're presenting difficult, challenging information. The context, the time frame, all of those things have to be considered, because when you're working with a group of 47 people in this instance, that's 47 very different human beings that are also traveling through this situation in their own way. Some of them have families that are responding differently. Some of them have aging parents or aging people that are at risk. Some of them have other issues. And that means everybody might get hit with your message in a different way. And so you have to be cautious about blanket statements, provisos that make everybody go forward, new rules, anything like that. Your delivery, your timing, and how you approach people on it could be very important. So that's unfortunate, because many of us would like to be expedient, but this situation, expediency is probably not your best friend, right? You're going to probably have to think through things. I have another group of people that's actually meeting together, social distancing. Today, they're going to, or excuse me, on Friday, they're going to have a meeting, and they're going to have like 6 different meetings in their buildings with a leader in each room. They're going to share a Zoom call, but then they're going to have some coalescing conversations in each of those rooms where they can social distance so that they can have one-on-one conversations. So they're coming up with some creative ways of keeping the contact level high, but also using technology appropriately.
Nice, nice. Fourth thing you said, decide in advance now how much you can do to help your employees through the crisis.
Yeah, so obviously in our country, the Paycheck Protection Program is largely written for this situation where as soon as possible, and again, I have found out in virtually every state of the country, in every region, if you talk to somebody, the story is going to be a little bit different about how this is playing out on the street. Like who's working, who's not working, what's essential, what's not essential. Healthcare, some places, believe it or not, the healthcare thing hasn't really hit the hospitals yet because there hasn't been that many cases. In other areas like New York, New Jersey, they're overwhelmed. It's completely overwhelmed. And so much of this depends upon where you are. But the idea was and is, let's keep people working that we can. So we're going to provide a loan to make that happen and put them to work doing whatever you can that provides value. And then keep them working so that when things ramp back up, you're going to have a workforce that's ready to rock and roll. So that's the concept. And yet within the realities of our situation, if there is no work or I have a number of clients that they simply can't work, their clients and their situations simply will not allow physical presence within the workspace. No. And so they've had to shut down. In many of the states where retail has been hit extraordinarily hard because of social distancing, you see these places just closing their doors. And there's many people that says, look, I can pay the rent for a month, but I probably can't pay it for 2 if I don't have any income. So that's what that's talking about, is where do you land in that reality and what do you got to do to patch the holes in the boat?
Okay. Yeah. Yep. So get good at weekly cash forecasting. Explain that a bit.
Again, kind of connecting in the same vein, your revenue is your revenue. And I can't overstate how for some businesses, like for example, a small retail business that was getting no foot traffic, keeping the lights on, keeping the doors open and keeping any operational thing at all doesn't make any sound business sense, right? So right now, for the period of 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever the government mandate is, the best decision is to simply close the doors and put a sign on the door and say, we will open back up whenever the governor says I can. In other cases where there is a small amount of business that can be done, it's right sizing the business. It's like we actually, in EOS, we have a tool called the accountability chart where we build out the organization and try to predict where we're going to be 6, 12 months from now. We're actually doing 1 week and 2 week accountability charts to say, this is the group that we need right now to do the work that we have, just so we can man it properly and we can communicate well with the entire team what we're going to be doing for the next 2 weeks so they can see it and they can have a certain expectation of what the possibility maybe 2 weeks from now might look like, right? In our particular situation right here, everybody's kind of looking at May 4th because that's the latest date that we've been given, that we're going to be doing what we call shelter in place. That's a very common term now. Most everybody knows what it means. And so at May 4th, everybody's just anxious to know, what does that look like? Can I go back and open up my store? Can I go back and send people out and do things? And that would be on my plan right now. I would be doing that on my plan. Absolutely.
Okay, that's good. And manage your accounts payable. Explain that to somebody that maybe is newer into business or not sure what that means.
Well, the easiest one that comes to mind is because it's been publicized is everybody's going to have rent to pay. And if you don't have an open business that's operational, how's that supposed to work, right? Because that's a payable. You have a landlord that's expecting a check from you. And one of the things that most of us are familiar with now is that we're doing landlord, no evictions. Nothing's going to happen here in the next month and a half to 2 months. And the government's being very hard on that. It's like, we're not going to throw people out of their homes or their businesses right now. And so what that's going to mean is, with some people, we're going to negotiate whether that month's rent ever gets paid or whether it gets paid over time or whether they're going to put some terms on it or what we're going to do. And that's going to be different for every single person and every landlord and every tenant, right? Because their situations are all different. Well, that's a payable just like everything else is. So let's pretend for a moment that I've got a water delivery business that comes and puts water in my water coolers, okay? That's a vendor for my business. And right now I may say, first of all, look, I don't need any water because there's nobody here at the building. So I need to let them know. And then secondly, it's like, hey, maybe we should renegotiate the terms on and the frequency of this until we know what this is going to look like on the other side. Most of us are kind of expecting this thing to be a 30-day-ish type of thing. But what happens if it's longer than that, right? That would require me to take that one simple example and then start applying it everywhere in my business, that I would have these relationships that I'm not doing business, they're probably not doing business. What can we do together to figure this out? Because I can't pay you. You're actually not really delivering anything, so there's nothing to pay for. Let's talk about what our terms are. So when we're talking about managing accounts payables, we're talking about, making some phone calls, reaching out to people that you owe money to, or maybe stopping delivery on something that you don't need right now, right? Why would you take that if you don't need it and you're not going to be using it?
Yeah. Yeah. Good. We said, watch your accounts receivable with due diligence.
So you are an accounts payable for somebody else, right?
Yeah.
I mean, our accounts receivable are somebody else's accounts payable. And so I would expect to be on the phone with the people that are due to pay me. And again, I think it's just like the landlord-tenant relationship. I think we've got to have an open mind. I think we need to look at this realistically, because demanding something of somebody right now is probably not going to get you what you want.
Yeah.
And we need to be realistic, because as hard pressed as we may be to say, I need cash to pay a bill, you're talking to somebody else on the other end of the phone that's in the exact same situation, right? And so what I would encourage is a ton of leadership empathy here across the board. So if you've got a great collections person in your business, it's just a hard knocks, go get them. You might want to have them lighten up a little bit in this period, because you don't need to be beating people up that are suffering in the same way that you might be.
Yeah, that's right. That's good. Nice. And the last one, number 9, was watch your scorecards with due diligence. So hit us with what is a scorecard?
So a scorecard, quite simply, is 5 to 15 really, really important numbers that matter a lot to your business. And we like to think of them as leading indicators. Most all businesses for a long time have been used to looking at their financials. They've been used to looking at what we call KPI, key performance indicators. And what we find almost across the board is that those are not actually leading indicators. They're telling you how you did, right? They're telling you the results of the work that you did. And that's common. We're all very used to that. That's our normal operating comfort zone. And what we like to do in EOS is we like to steer you toward what happens earlier, what happens before that. And we have a great story that we tell about a gentleman named Charles Schwab. And he wasn't the Charles Schwab that we know of today that trades stocks. He was a guy that worked for Bethlehem Steel. And he was brought into a low-performing steel mill. It was the lowest-performing mill in the company's group. And he wanted to figure out what was going on. So after a couple of days watching what was happening, kind of capturing the operations, the culture, and the nature of the mill, he went down on the floor after one shift was coming off of the furnace, and he said, how many heats did your crew do this term? And he said, we did 2. So on the door where the crews walked in and out of the furnace, he wrote a big 2 with chalk on the floor. So guess what happened when the crew coming on shift asked? He said, what's that 2 doing on the floor? Well, they got the immediate answer. That's how many heats the crew before you did. Guess what the number was the next morning?
How many?
It was a 3. And so it went. Crew after crew saw the new number on the floor, and they eventually got that mill up to one of the higher performing mills within the deal. And all they did is wrote a number on the floor, right? So we think measurables like that are key indicators of performance, because when he first came into the mill, he just simply had the information the mill was underperforming. You need to figure out why. And the leading indicator was those crews knowing how many heats they could do versus how many heats they were willing to do, right? And that little bit of competition, that little bit of iron sharpening iron, figuratively speaking, got those 2 crews built up to where they were in competition with one another, and they found out exactly how many they actually could do. And so he didn't have to do anything else. He didn't have to, pull out a whip. He didn't have to lock anybody down. He didn't have to force anything. He just provided a number. And so we're looking for those kind of numbers. If we could live with those kind of numbers on our scorecard that told us before stuff was happening, what was happening, that would be way better than the way we have all traditionally looked. We're all backward looking. What I tell people, if you're looking at your financials as your only scorecard measurable, and I won't discount that it's an important measurable, don't get me wrong, but if you're looking at your financials, in most businesses, you're 30 to 45 days behind whatever occurred to actually produce that financial element. Because most of our financials come about 6 to 15 days after the end of the month, right? That's when we close our books. That's not happening in real time with whatever it was that created those financials. And so we like to look at financials as a report card, just like the one you got in school. And if you were walking home with your report card, there wasn't a darn thing you could do to change that grade the day that you were taking it home to mom and dad, right? Yeah. We want to know what it took to get that grade so that you're doing your work each week, you're doing your homework, you're turning in your assignments, you're doing your reading, and you're taking your quizzes. If we're tracking all the quizzes, homework, and daily assignments, we're going to know ahead of time what your grade's going to be.
Yeah.
right?
Good.
So an ideal scorecard, Ryan, is one that by looking at those numbers, I can predict what my financials are going to look like without having to get them.
Nice.
If I have a great scorecard.
Yeah. It's good. Matt, what else as you look at entrepreneurs and businesses right now? What other message do you have for them in this season and in this time? Because I know this email was written, about 3 weeks ago now. I think actually, as I looked at the
Yeah.
date, and things have transpired since then. So what else?
Yeah.
What else would you say to a business owner right now?
Well, I guess in reflection, all of those things are still pretty key, right? The thing I would say, and I've heard this from one of my fellow EOSIs, the EOS implementers, he says, you know what? The plane's in the air, right? If you have a business, the plane is in the air. So in an emergency, for all intents and purposes, you still have to fly the plane. And so that's really where we're at, is figuring out what it's going to take to keep that plane in the air. And if for reasons that are compelling and overwhelming, it's not going to stay in the air, let's at least land it safely, right? And that takes control. You have to have control. You have to have your hand on the levers. You have to have your eye on the gauges, and you have to know what's happening. And so that'd be my admonishment is like, don't stall. Don't stop. My sense is I have some businesses, and I've heard of many that are just like, they don't know what to do. And I would say, oh my goodness, this is the best time to engage in something like EOS to, if nothing else, give you a next step. Because if you're stalling and you don't know what to do and you feel frozen, you've got to take a step forward. The ancient, Chinese Confucians say, what is it? The travel of 1,000 miles starts with one step, and you've got to take a step. If you can't take a step, or you're unwilling to, or you're fearful to do it, you need to get out of that mode. You need to get your head right. And you need to move forward. There's always a next step, no matter what. You have to determine it. You have to take it. And if it's not a good step, or if it's a wrong step, the beauty is you can fix it and change it, right? Because if you don't, I'm pretty sure I know what the outcome is going to be. And it's not going to be what you want.
That's good. Matt, what do you recommend as a next step for an entrepreneur or business owner right now in this season that goes, okay, EOS, I need help. And what should they do? And how could they contact you? And how can you help them in this point in time with EOS?
The first thing that I think is the healthiest thing for anybody to do is keep talking to other human beings. One of the things that often happens in a situation like this is we tend to close down, right? We fold up. Yeah. And that's not healthy, because when you become just isolated by yourself and you're not talking to anybody about anything, things in your head tend to go sideways. And so it's really good corrective action just to be talking to other human beings, just like you and I are right now, just like people that hopefully watch this will be doing. But the best way to do that today is to pick up the phone. In this virtual world, Zoom meetings are awesome. In spite of the security issues, there are ways to deal with that. We both talked about that earlier. You can do it. Get on the phone, get in front of people, talk to people, start communicating if you haven't been, because that's the worst place to be, is to be folded up, right? Yep. Communicate. And so pick up the phone, talk to an implementer like myself, talk to EOS Worldwide. They will get you to an implementer. Talk to somebody just to talk to somebody. It may not move forward any farther than that, but that's a great next step. In our environment, if this is something that you're interested in and it sounds like you could use it, we would meet with 90 minutes together with you and your leaders, and we would assess whether or not this is a good fit for you and a good thing to do for you. That can be done virtually very, very effectively right now. And if that next step made sense for you, everything else will make sense at that point in time. But I would say the first thing to do is pick up the phone. Second thing to do is, if you're already interested, call me and we'll do a 90-minute meeting and we'll determine who can help you the best. And then take it from there.
Yeah, it's good. One of the things I saw EOS and you worked with us on was this virtual IDS. And I think, I just think that's brilliant in a time like now for leadership teams to be able to get on with a call with a facilitator like yourself, a consultant that's going to walk along and really facilitate the idea of, let's make a list of issues and let's prioritize them and let's start addressing them and discussing them and coming up with tangible solutions and steps. after the meeting. For us, it was incredibly helpful.
Yeah. And we're offering that up to not only our existing clients, because some of our existing clients, that right now is the best thing for them to do, is just to do a 3 to 4 hour IDSing session. We're even offering that up to people that, just like you said, if that sounds like a good idea and you'd like to do that, then we would be willing to do that with somebody. So again, it starts with a phone call, starts with an interaction, starts with an assessment and finding out what the best thing for you is. But I think you're absolutely right, Ryan. I think there's people that aren't even running on EOS that could probably benefit from that exercise.
Yeah, I think the IDS session is a bit of a sampler, a little taste of EOS, and to see, wow, this just the facilitation of that adds a lot of value to a business organization.
Absolutely. And all those things that you listed off could be very effectively handled in a session like that, so people could get their grip on those 9 suggestions that we made.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for your time today and sharing some wisdom. I really I think this is going to be helpful for people, and I think that EOS is like I said, it's been a blessing for me, and I am always glad to get to share it with others. And the book Traction has been really changed a lot of things for our business, and I would say ultimately my life. And so really appreciate your input and generosity with your wisdom today. So thank you.
Totally thrilled to do it. You know I am. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.